Level number 2, permission. You can't lead people until you like people. Making the shift from position to permission brings a person's first real step into leadership. Why do I say that? Because leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Leaders who rely on their positions to move people rarely develop influence with them. If their subordinates do what they are asked, it's usually because they think they have to receive their pay, keep their jobs, prevent being reprimanded, and so on. In contrast, when a leader learns to function on the permission level, everything changes. People do more than merely comply with orders. They actually start to follow. And they do so because they really want to. Why? Because the leader begins to influence people with relationship, not just position. Building relationships develops a foundation for effectively leading others. It also starts to break down organizational silos as people connect across the lines between their job descriptions or departments. The more barriers come down and relationships deepen, the broader the foundation for leading others becomes. When people feel liked, cared for, included, valued, and trusted, they begin to work together with their leader and each other, and that can change the entire working environment. The old saying is really true. People go along with leaders they get along with. Relationships are a major key to success, whether you're trying to sell, coach, teach, lead, or simply navigate the daily tasks of life. In the context of sales, Jeffrey Gitomer, author of the Sales Bible and Jeffrey Gitomer's Little Red Book of Selling, uses the analogy of the rock, paper, scissors game to describe the importance of relationships. Here's the rock, paper, scissors game of selling. Relationship is more powerful than price. Relationship is more powerful than delivery. Relationship is more powerful than quality. Relationship is more powerful than service. That can also be said about leading. Relationships have great power. Moving up to level 2 is an important development in the leadership because that is where followers give their supervisors permission to lead them. People change from being subordinates to followers for the first time, and that means there is movement. Remember, leadership always means that people are going somewhere. They aren't static. No journey, no leadership. The upside of permission. The workplace has become more pleasant for everyone. There are many upsides to level 2 because the focus on relationship building opens up so many new avenues of leadership. Here are my top 5. Number 1, leadership permission makes work more enjoyable. Positional leaders often focus their efforts on serving themselves or their organization with too little regard for others. However, leaders who move up to level 2 shift their focus from me to we. They like people and treat them like individuals. They develop relationships and win people over with interaction instead of using the power of their position. That shift in attitude creates a positive shift in the working environment. The workplace becomes more friendly. People begin to like each other. Chemistry starts to develop on the team. People no longer possess a have-to mindset. Instead, it turns to want to. The workplace becomes more enjoyable for everyone, leaders and followers alike. The key to moving up to the permission level is having the right attitude. Level 2 leaders exemplify the words of J. Donald Walters, who asserted leadership is an opportunity to serve. Permissional leaders like people and want to help them. They want to see them succeed. The prevalent attitude is one of serving others and bringing out the best in the people that they work with. I'm sorry to say that in my first professional leadership position, I focused way too much of my attention on myself and my organization. I knew where I wanted to go, and all I cared about in the beginning was getting there. What a mistake. It took me a couple of years to change my attitude and slow down enough to get to know people and to find out what they cared about. It made a huge difference in my life and leadership. Now, more than 40 years later, I have truly changed. Today, my greatest joy comes from working with my team, not doing the work itself. I've gone from loving my work and looking for people to help me to loving my people and looking for ways to help them. As a result, the journey has become much more enjoyable. Number 2, leadership permission increases the energy level. What happens when you spend time with people you don't especially like or who don't like you? Doesn't it drain you of energy? That kind of environment brings most people down. Even in a neutral environment, if you are with people you don't know very well, doesn't it require a lot of energy to get to know them? Connecting with others always takes energy. Conversely, what happens when you spend time with people you know and like? Doesn't it give you energy? I know it does me. Spending time with people I love, whether at work, at home, or while playing, is my greatest joy, and it always energizes me. Good relationships create energy, and they give people's interaction a positive tone. When you invest time and effort to get to know people and build good relationships, it actually pays off with greater energy once the relationships are built. And in that kind of positive, energetic environment, people are willing to give their best because they know the leader wants the best for them. Number 3, leadership permission opens up channels of communication. On level number 2, top-down positional leadership is replaced with side-by-side relationships. That requires and cultivates good communication. On the permission level, leaders listen to their people, and their people listen to them. The interplay of communication between good leaders and their people on level 2 can be found in a quote by former General Electric CEO Jack Welch. He describes an ideal leader as somebody who can develop a vision of what he or she wants their business unit, their activity to do, and to be. Somebody who is able to articulate to the entire unit what the business is and gain through a sharing of discussion, listening and talking, and acceptance of the vision, and someone who then can relentlessly drive implementation of that vision to a successful conclusion. Welch also commented, above all else, good leaders are open. They go up and down and around their organization to reach people. They don't stick to established channels. They're informal. They're straight with people. They make a religion out of being accessible. I believe most leaders are naturally better at talking than listening. I know that was true for me when I was early in my leadership journey. I was intent on communicating my vision to others and making sure they understood my agenda. I wanted communication to go only one way, from me to them. The result was that few people bought into my leadership or my vision. I failed to realize that the road to vision buy-in was a two-way communication. That meant I had to learn how to listen. Recently, I came across an explanation of the Chinese symbol for the verb to listen. I thought it gave tremendous insight into the concept. The word, pronounced ting, is made up of smaller symbols with specific meanings. Those symbols represent you, indicating the focus is on the other person, not on yourself. The ear, the primary tool used in listening. The eyes, which we use to discover nonverbal clues to communication. Undivided attention, which every person deserves if we intend to listen to all that is said, and the heart, which indicates that we are open to the other person on an emotional level, not just an intellectual one. In other words, when I really open up the channels of communication on level 2 and really listen, here's what I must give others. Ears, I hear what you say. Eyes, I see what you say. Heart, I feel what you say. Undivided attention, I value who you are and what you say. Only when we do those things are we able to build positive relationships and persuade people to follow us. When leaders forge relationships on level 2, they not only create better communication, they also build a community. Sociologist Amitai Etzioni observed, when the term community is used, the notion that typically comes to mind is a place in which people know and care for one another. The kind of place in which people do not merely ask, "How are you?" as a formality, but care about the answer. Level 2 leadership creates an environment where people begin to work together in a spirit of community and to communicate with one another openly. Number 4, leadership permission focuses on the value of each person. Level 2 leadership is relationally driven. That is only possible when people respect and value one another. It is impossible to relate well with those you don't respect. When respect lessens in a relationship, the relationship diminishes. You can care for people without leading them, but you cannot lead them effectively beyond level 1 without caring for them. All great leaders value people, and they lift the value bar in their organizations. One of the greatest leaders in our lifetime is Nelson Mandela. He continually modeled a leadership that placed high value on every person. His strength and humility are legendary, and he was aware of how important his attitude was to his leadership. He observed, "You see, when there is a danger, a good leader takes the front line. But when there is a celebration, a good leader stays in the back room." If you want the cooperation of human beings around you, make them feel that they are important, and you do that by being humble. Recently, while on a trip to South Africa, I stopped at a bookstore in Johannesburg and picked up the book Leading Like Madiba, Leadership Lessons from Nelson Mandela by Martin Kalunga Banda. I read it on my flight from South Africa to Kenya. It was filled with personal accounts of people who had witnessed their leader, Nelson Mandela, placing high value on people and lifting them. One of my favorite stories was about a successful businessman named Peter who had been invited by the president to come to his home and have breakfast. On the day of their appointment, Peter dressed in his best and asked one of his company drivers, Dumi, to take him to Mr. Mandela's home. To Peter's amazement, his host was waiting for him in the parking lot. Peter recalled, "I felt both extremely elated and humbled that Mr. Mandela was waiting outside for me. He warmly greeted the driver and me. He then gestured that we enter the house. However, in the traditional way of corporate behavior and protocol, the driver retreated quietly and remained in the car. Mr. Mandela invited me to the breakfast table. Just before we started eating, my host seemed to miss something. He asked, 'Peter, I thought there were two of you.' I responded, 'No, sir, I came alone.' 'What about the other gentleman?' he insisted, and I replied, 'No, sir, that one is just a driver. He will wait in the car.' At that point, Mr. Mandela stood up and went out to where the driver was. He introduced himself to the driver and asked him to join us for breakfast. Mr. Mandela then walked to the kitchen and said, 'Dumi is joining us for breakfast. Can we have another plate, please?' Peter never forgot what Mandela did, and neither did Dumi. Peter went on to say, 'When leaders learn to see the personalities that lie behind these seemingly humble titles, drivers, guards, and servants, the people in those jobs do not just feel appreciated, they discover and walk into new horizons of their lives. They become great performers at what they do. They find personal fulfillment. That is the impact great leaders can have on people. But you don't have to be a great leader to care about people. You just have to make the decision to do it.' Nothing lifts a person like being respected and valued by others. As a leader on level 2, your goal should be to become aware of the uniqueness of people and learn to appreciate their differences. You need to let them know that they matter, that you see them as individual human beings, not just workers. This attitude makes a positive impact on people, and it strengthens your leadership. At the beginning of my ministerial career, my father gave me a great piece of advice. He said, 'Son, the vast majority of people who walk through the doors of the church feel undervalued, insecure, and lost. It's your job to change that.' I never forgot what he said. And during my 26-year career as a pastor, I always strove to follow that advice. I also tried to bring it into my business relationships. I even do it at home. Every day I let my wife Margaret know how much I value her. When our children were growing up, we tried to provide an environment where we valued them and provided unconditional love. And as grandparents, Margaret and I enjoy seeing our grandchildren thrive as their parents, and we show them every day how important they are to us. There is a common thread in all great businesses, governments, educational centers, and religious institutions. That thread is everyone's valuing and respecting people. As a leader who moves up to level 2, you can help to set an example of that for your organization. Number 5, leadership permission nurtures trust. Leaders who move up from level 1 to level number 2 stop trying to impress others to maintain their position and start developing trust to maintain their relationships. That can be tough, because too often leaders place a higher value on impressing others than on having integrity with them. A story in a book by my friend Bill Hybels is a classic illustration of what happens when leaders want others to be impressed. Bill writes, "A newly promoted colonel had moved into a recently built makeshift office during the Gulf War. He had just arrived and was just getting things organized when out of the corner of his eye, he saw a private coming his way carrying a toolbox. Wanting to seem important, he quickly spun around and picked up his phone. 'Yes, General Schwarzkopf. Yes, of course.' "I think that's an excellent plan," he said. "You've got my support on it. Thanks for checking with me. Let's touch base again soon, Norm. Goodbye." And then he briskly hung up and turned around. "And what can I do for you?" he asked the private. "I'm just here to hook up your phone." Trust is the foundation of permission. If you have integrity with people, you develop trust. The more trust you develop, the stronger the relationship becomes. The better the relationship, the greater the potential for a leader to gain permission to lead. It's a building process that takes time, energy, and intentionality. Retired Admiral James Stockdale said, "When the crunch comes, people cling to those they know they can trust, those who are not detached but involved. That is the power of permission. In times of difficulty, relationships are a shelter. In times of opportunity, they are a launching pad. Trust is required for people to feel safe enough to create, share, question, attempt, and risk. Without it, leadership is weak and teamwork is impossible." The downside of permission. The pressure is on you to build positive relationships. If you're a relational person, as I am, you may be saying to yourself, what downside can there possibly be to developing relationships, building trust, and gaining people's permission to lead them? Isn't it all good? My answer has to be no. While it is true that the positives far outweigh the negatives, there are still downsides to level 2. Here are the ones I have observed. Number 1, permission leadership appears too soft for some people. In a hard-charging, high-performance, leadership-intensive environment, leading by permission may appear soft to some people. Caring for people and being relational can be seen as weak, especially by leaders who possess a natural bias toward action rather than affection. For that reason, some people dismiss it. What a mistake, and what a handicap to their leadership potential. It has been my observation that most people start their leadership focused on either the hard aspects of leadership, meaning the productivity side, or on the soft aspects, meaning the relational side. Those who start on the hard side and refuse to learn softer skills often get stuck on level 1. They desire to go to level 3 production, but they can't achieve it without learning and earning level number 2 first. In contrast, those who start on the soft side gladly and easily work their way up to level 2, permission, but if they don't do more than just win relationships, they get stuck and never move up to level number 3, production. It takes both permission and production to become a good leader. I started my leadership career on the soft side. Here's the good news. I quickly built relationships with people. Here's the bad news. I never wanted to make hard decisions. I found it easy to love people, but when loving people created tension for leading them, I usually stopped leading. One of the reasons has to do with my upbringing. I grew up in a loving home, and as a result, I mistakenly thought that I could just love people to the top. But I also fell into the trap of wanting to make only decisions that were approved and accepted by all. I got stuck on level 2 because my softness became a lid on my leadership. It took an internal crisis to help me finally see what I was doing wrong. It occurred in my first pastorate, which was in a little country church in southern Indiana. Each year, the congregation voted on whether to keep the pastor. As a young leader that first year in the church, my thoughts and actions had been dominated by making everyone happy. I had done everything in my power to do that, and I thought that I had succeeded. Then the vote came. For as long as I live, I will never forget the results. 31 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstention. I was devastated. When your goal is to please everyone and anyone is displeased, it is seen as a failure. I couldn't believe that someone didn't like me. And it was almost just as bad that someone else didn't care enough to vote one way or the other. That night, after everyone else had gone home, I called my father. "Dad," I said, "I don't know what I should do. Should I stay or should I go?" I was shocked to hear him laughing on the other end of the line. "Son, trust me, you need to stay," he responded. "It's the best vote that you will ever have." I stayed, but I still wasn't leading right. For the next few months, I constantly asked myself 2 questions. Who voted against me, and what did I do wrong? My immaturity made me think that good leaders always had buy-in from everyone. They didn't have to deal with conflict, and they could avoid the reality of making hard decisions. And by the way, my dad was right. In my career, it was the best vote that I ever had. I was stuck in this wrong kind of thinking for several months, but then I realized what my real problem was. I was a people pleaser. My goal had been to make everyone happy. That was the wrong goal. As a leader, my goal should have been to help people, not to make them happy. That realization changed my leadership. For the first time, I was freed up. I was no longer held captive by every person's opinion, which was a very unhealthy place to be. I could focus on doing what I believed was best for the organization and the people. Making everyone happy isn't responsible, nor is it even possible. This realization made me more courageous and more realistic at the same time. I needed to add the hard side of leadership to my natural bent toward the relational soft side. Others have to learn the soft side and add it to the hard, productive side. The point is, you need both. If you're relational without being productive, you and your team won't achieve any progress. If you're productive without being relational, you may make a small degree of progress in the beginning, but you'll fall short in the long run because you either alienate your people or burn them out. You can't become successful in leadership until you learn both. Number 2. Leading by permission can be frustrating for achievers. High achievers want to get things done and get them done now. They usually don't want to slow down for anything or anyone. Leading by permission requires them to do exactly that. Building relationships takes time. It can be very slow work. If at one end of the spectrum you have achievers ignoring relationships, at the other end you have highly relational people who allow relationships to become an end unto themselves, that's not healthy either. In fact, the most common reason for leaders not moving up to level 3 is that they become so relational that they lose sight of the primary goal of leadership, helping others work together, move forward, and achieve. When relationships become an end unto themselves, then high-achieving followers who focus on bottom-line results become restless. When that happens, they often try to do one of two things: take over or leave. You must win both levels as a leader to be successful. If you're a high achiever who has neglected relationships in your leadership, you may be saying to yourself, I haven't needed to develop relationships to be a good leader. I don't think a leader really needs level 2. Here's my answer to that. As long as you're winning, people are willing to follow, even if you're hard on them or positional in your leadership. However, when you drive people to achieve without slowing down to build relationships, a part of them will want to see you lose. There's a saying that if you step on people's fingers on the way up, they may trip you on the way down. At the very least, if you fail, they'll celebrate your fall and then move on. Number 3. Permissional leaders can be taken advantage of. People whose leadership style is non-relational are usually seen as no-nonsense leaders. Positional leaders often use their positions to distance themselves from subordinates. High achievers sometimes intimidate their followers. But when leaders are relational, their followers naturally get closer to them. That sometimes means that they mistake kindness for weakness. They believe that encouragement means they don't have to respect boundaries. They assume that empowerment means that they have the freedom to do whatever they want. As a result, they take advantage of their leaders. I have to admit, this has happened to me. When I have encouraged people, some have built on it. Others have taken advantage of it. Developing close relationships with people who work with me has resulted in some lifelong friendships that I cherish deeply. But it also has resulted in some lifelong disappointments. As you build relationships with people on level number 2, I believe you will find that there are 4 kinds of people. Takers, those who leverage their relationships to better themselves, but not you or anyone else. They borrow your influence, but keep the return. Developers, those who leverage the relationship in a positive way, bettering themselves and you. Acquaintances, those who live off their relationship with you but never do anything with it. They hang around waiting for something good to come to them, content to live off of others' successes and never taking responsibility to grow themselves. Friends, those who enjoy their relationship with you, returning your goodwill and never taking unfair advantage of it. Being relational is a risk just as it is when you open yourself up to falling in love. Sure, you can stay guarded and never get hurt, but you also will never have a chance to have a deep, rewarding relationship that will enrich your life and the lives of others. I hope you will choose to build relationships. I made that choice early in my leadership life, and though I've been hurt, and I've occasionally had others take advantage of me, I don't regret it. Most people respect the relationship, treat it the right way, and add great value to me. Number 4, permission leadership requires openness to be effective. Author and pastor Rick Warren observes, "You can impress people from a distance, but you must get close to influence them. When you do that, they can see your flaws." However, Warren notes, the most essential quality for leadership is not perfection, but credibility. People must be able to trust you. Most people don't want to admit their mistakes, expose their faults, and face up to their shortcomings. They don't want to be discovered. They don't get too close to people because of the negatives in their lives. And if people receive a leadership position, the urge to hide their weaknesses can become even stronger. Most people believe they must show greater strength as leaders. However, if leaders try to maintain a facade with the people they lead, they cannot build authentic relationships. To develop authentic relationships on the permission level, leaders need to be authentic. They must admit their mistakes. They must own up to their faults. They must recognize their shortcomings. In other words, they must be the real deal. That is a vulnerable place to be for a leader. And truthfully, it is one of the main reasons many leaders never progress from level 1 to level 2 in leadership. Number 5, permission leadership is difficult for people who are not naturally likable. If we're honest, we must admit that some individuals are naturally gifted with people. They interact well with others and easily develop relationships. Level 2 comes naturally for such people. But what about the people who are not naturally gifted at working with people? For them, moving up to level 2 usually doesn't come as easily. If they want to win permission with others, they have to work to make themselves more likable. For years I have observed people who do not work well with others, and I have asked myself why they don't. My conclusion is that in most cases people who are not likable don't like people very much. I'm not saying that they hate others, but I am saying that they don't care for others enough to commit the energy needed to make good connections with them. I believe people will not get ahead with others unless they are willing to get behind others. How can we do that? How can we become more likable? By doing the following. Make a choice to care about others. Liking people and caring about people is a choice within your control. If you haven't already, make that choice. Look for something that is likable about every person you meet. It's there. Make it your job to find it. Discover what is likable about yourself, and do whatever you can to share that with every person that you meet. Make the effort every day to express what you like about every person in your life. If you want to win people's permission and lead effectively on level 2, you must like people and become more likable. Number 6. Permission leadership forces you to deal with the whole person. Auto pioneer Henry Ford once asked, "Why is it that I always get the whole person when what I really want is a pair of hands?" Let's face it, relationships are messy. Many leaders would rather deal with people only in terms of their work life. But the reality is that when you lead someone, you always get the whole person, including their dysfunctions, home life, health issues, and quirks. Good leaders understand that the heart of leadership is dealing with people and working with the good, the bad, and the ugly in everyone. They do this on level 2. Leadership experts Warren Bennis and Burt Nanus put it this way. Leadership is an essentially human business. Both universities and corporations seriously miss the point with their overemphasis on formal quantitative tools, unambiguous problems, and ridiculously oversimplified human relations cases. What we have found is that the higher the rank, the more interpersonal and human the undertaking. Our top executives spend roughly 90% of their time concerned with the messiness of people problems. I think if we're honest, we have to admit that the messiness of people problems is what makes leadership no fun. So often as we get to know others and we start to see their flaws, we become disillusioned with them. and we often end up like the woman at the cocktail party who is trying her best to look happy. Someone noticed a gargantuan sparkling rock on her finger and exclaimed, "Wow, what a beautiful diamond." "Yes," she said, "it's a Callahan diamond." "I wish I had one," the onlooker replied. "No, you don't," the woman tartly responded. "Why not?" "Because it comes with the Callahan curse." "The Callahan curse? What's that?" With a deep sigh and a forlorn look, she said, "Mr. Callahan." The more we learn about others, the more disappointed we may be. Why? Because each of us has imperfections and irritating habits. We all fail. After the Nixon years, Billy Graham said, "Everybody has a little Watergate in him. We must learn to accept that about one another and still work together." As a leader, you may be tempted to build relationships only with the people you like or with whom you are highly compatible, and to ignore the others. However, by doing that, you have the potential to lose a lot of people. It's important to remember that while the things we have in common make many relationships enjoyable, the differences are what really make them interesting. Good leaders on level 2 deal successfully with those differences and leverage them for the benefit of the team and the organization. Good leaders are able to look at hard truths, see people's flaws, face reality, and do it in a spirit of grace and truth. They don't avoid problems. They solve them. Abolitionist leader Frederick Douglass once said that you can't expect to get a crop without plowing, and you can't expect rain without thunder and lightning. Leaders who build relationships understand that conflict is a part of progress. Often it is even constructive. The bottom line on level 2 is that most of the downsides of leadership come from dealing with people. If you care about people and understand them, then you expect things not to go smoothly. If you go into leadership on the permission level with that expectation, it frees you up to lead with a positive attitude and an open mind. You know that as long as people still have a pulse, you will be dealing with messy and difficult situations. Best behaviors on level number 2. How to gain people's permission. If you find yourself in a place where you need to start working to win people's permission on level 2, what should you do? How can you make the most of the opportunity to develop as a relational leader? Do the following. Number 1. Connect with yourself before trying to connect with others. One of the secrets of connecting with people and building relationships is knowing and liking yourself. In my book, Winning with People, I call it the mirror principle, which says the first person we must examine is ourselves. The work in relationship building always has to start with yourself. What does that mean? The first person I must know is myself. That speaks of self-awareness. Human nature seems to endow people with the ability to size up everybody in the world but themselves. Very few people are gifted with natural self-awareness. So what is a person to do? Become a student of yourself. Learn your strengths and weaknesses. Ask others to evaluate you. Understand the way you think, feel, and act in every kind of situation. Then once you know who you are, forget about yourself and place your focus on others. You will relate to other people from a place of strength. The first person I must get along with is myself. That speaks of my self-image. I know people who've never gotten along with themselves a single day in their lives. They don't like how they look, or they wish they had been endowed with different gifting or a different personality type. They don't like where they came from or where they're going. There are a lot of things you can change about yourself. Work hard at those. But there are also many you can't. Accept them. Take the advice of Thomas Jefferson. In matters of conscience, stand like a rock. In matters of fashion, go with the flow. The first person to cause me problems is myself. That speaks of self-honesty. Comedian Jack Paar quipped, "Looking back, my life seems like one big obstacle race with me being the chief obstacle." Most people who don't get anywhere in life have themselves to blame. They don't believe in themselves. They create problems and then pretend that they are someone else's fault. They want change but won't grow. It's very difficult to be self-deluded and successful at the same time. Even the few who manage to pull it off can never sustain it. If you want to build relationships, you need to be honest, starting with yourself. The first person I must change is myself. That speaks of self-improvement. If you want to change your life for the better, then the first thing you must do is change yourself for the better. Author Samuel Johnson advised that he who has so little knowledge of human nature as to seek happiness by changing anything but his own disposition will waste his life in fruitless efforts and multiply the grief which he purposes to remove. Too often we look outside of ourselves for the source of our problems. The reality is that many come from inside of us. The first person who can make a difference is myself. That speaks of self-responsibility. Every significant accomplishment begins with one person stepping up and committing to make a difference. That person then takes responsibility to pass it on to others. If you don't take responsibility for yourself, then don't expect your life to become any different from what it is right now. Number 2, develop a people-oriented leadership style. Permissional leaders don't rely on rules to lead people. They don't depend on systems. And they never try to rule with a stick. Anyone who does needs to know that every stick eventually breaks. Instead, they use a personal touch whenever they deal with people. They listen, learn, and then lead. They develop relationships. They have more than an open-door policy. They know the door swings both ways. They go through it and get out among their people to connect. Herb Kelleher said, "Leading an organization is as much about soul as it is about systems." Effective leadership finds its source in understanding. Unless a leader has an awareness of humanity, a sensitivity toward the hopes and aspirations of those he leads, and the capacity to analyze the emotional forces that motivate conduct, he will be unable to produce and be successful regardless of how often other incentives are given. Another way to say it is that good leaders never take people out of the equation in anything they do. They always take people into account. Where they are, what they believe, what they're feeling. Every question they ask is expressed in the context of people. Knowing what to do isn't enough to make someone a good leader. Just because something is right doesn't necessarily mean that people will let you do it. Good leaders take that into account, and they think and plan accordingly. If you want to be successful on level 2, you must think less in terms of systems and more in terms of people's emotions. You must think more in terms of human capacity and less in terms of regulations. You must think more in terms of buy-in and less in terms of procedures. In other words, you must think of people before you try to achieve progress. To do that as a permissional leader, you must exhibit a consistent mood, maintain an optimistic attitude, possess a listening ear, and present to others your authentic self. Number 3, practice the golden rule. One of the criticisms of permissional leadership is that it can become manipulative. I agree that leaders who put an emphasis on motivating people can use leadership for personal gain at the expense of others. There is a fine line between manipulating people and motivating them. However, a permissional leader can keep that tendency in check and keep from crossing over from motivation to manipulation by following the golden rule. I am often given the opportunity to travel internationally and to speak to a wide variety of audiences with different cultures, languages, histories, values, and interests. However, all request that I spend some time teaching them about integrity in relationships. In those situations, I always teach the golden rule. Treat others as you want others to treat you. That simple rule can be universally understood and followed. It establishes the relationship standard that makes sense and can be applied. And it is a core teaching that can be found in every culture and religion. It is the simplest, most profound, and most positive guide to living there is. Take a look at how many variations on the golden rule I was able to find and the religions from which they come. Christianity. Whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them. Islam. No one of you is a believer until he loves for his neighbor what he loves for himself. Judaism. What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow man. This is the entire law. All the rest is commentary. Buddhism. Hurt not others with that which pains yourself. Hinduism. This is the sum of duty. Do not unto others what you would not have them do unto you. Zoroastrianism. Whatever is disagreeable to yourself, do not do unto others. Confucianism. What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others. Baha'i. And if thine eyes be turned towards justice, choose thou for thy neighbor that which thou choosest for thyself. Jainism. A man should wonder about treating all creatures as he himself would be treated. Yoruba proverb in Nigeria. One going to take a pointed stick to pinch a baby bird should first try it on himself to feel how it hurts. It is clear that the Golden Rule cuts across cultural and religious boundaries and is embraced by people from nearly every part of the world. And what does practicing the Golden Rule in leadership do? It enables everyone to feel respected. That changes the entire environment of a department or an organization. When leaders change from driving people in a positional environment to respecting people in a permissional environment, their people go from feeling like a stake to feeling like a stakeholder. Number 4, become a chief encourager of your team. For many years, I've enjoyed the relationship of the Cathy family, the leaders of Chick-fil-A. One day I was having dinner with Truett Cathy, the company's founder, and he said, "Do you know how I identify someone who needs encouragement? If the person is breathing, they need a pat on the back." I have yet to meet a person who doesn't enjoy and benefit from encouragement. No one is too successful, old, experienced, or educated to appreciate positive praise and encouragement from another person. A great example of this can be found in the lives of two talented authors and teachers, C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. The friends, both professors at Oxford, often met to share with each other the fiction they were writing. When Tolkien was writing The Lord of the Rings, he became discouraged. Lewis continually encouraged his friend to keep writing. "Tollers, where's the next chapter? You can't give up now," Lewis would chide. In later years, Tolkien acknowledged how much a difference Lewis's positive input had made. "The unspeakable debt I owe him cannot be fathomed," wrote Tolkien. "For long, he was my only audience." As a leader, you have great power to lift people up, Mother Teresa said. Kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are endless. I'm sure Lewis's encouraging words echoed in Tolkien's ears as he labored to write his fantasy masterpiece. As a leader, you can have a similar impact on others. People enjoy affirmation from a peer, but they really value it from their leader. The words, "I'm glad you work with me. You add incredible value to the team," mean a lot coming from someone who has the best interest of the team, department, or organization at heart. If you want people to be positive and to always be glad when they see you coming, encourage them. If you become the chief encourager of the people on your team, they will work hard and strive to meet your positive expectations. Number 5, strike a balance between care and candor. Many people get the wrong idea about the concept of permissional leadership when they become acquainted with it. Some think that succeeding on the permission level of leadership means treating the people on their team like family. That is almost always a mistake. People don't deal realistically with their family. I don't. I have a commitment level with them that is deeper than with others. Regardless of what they do, I am committed to giving them unconditional love. They have privileges that I extend to no other people. And compromise is a constant. Anyone who says they don't believe in compromise has never been married or stayed married. What makes a family great isn't what makes a team great. Families value community over contribution. Businesses value contribution over community. The best teams strike a balance. Others think being a permissional leader means giving team members permission to do whatever they want. That idea is also wrong. Just because you care about people doesn't mean you let them work without responsibility or accountability. If you care about people, treat them with respect and build positive relationships with them. You actually have more numerous opportunities to speak candidly and have hard conversations with them that will help them to grow and perform better. Every person has problems and makes mistakes in the workplace. Every person needs to improve and needs someone to come alongside of them and help them improve. As a leader, it is your responsibility and your privilege to be the person who helps them get better. That often begins with candid conversation. But before you have it, it helps to ask yourself what the nature of the problem might be. My friend Sam Chan says that when he is having difficulty with a person, he asks himself one simple question. Is this person a can't or a won't? Can't is about their abilities. We can help these kind of people in most cases, not in all cases, but in most. But won't is about attitude. If the issue is attitude, the time to let that person know there is a problem is now. Because here's the deal. We hire people for what they know, and we fire them for who they are. I believe that people can change their attitudes and can improve their abilities. And because I do, I talk to them about where they're coming up short. If you're a leader and you want to help people, you need to be willing to have those tough conversations. So how does a leader handle being relational while still being able to move people forward? By balancing care and candor. Care without candor creates dysfunctional relationships. Candor without care creates distant relationships. But care balanced with candor creates developing relationships. Allow me to help you understand how care and candor work together to help a leader succeed on level 2. Caring values the person while candor values the person's potential. To lead successfully on levels 2 and higher, it is important for you to value people. That is foundational to solid relationships. Caring for others demonstrates that you value them. However, if you want to help them get better, you have to be honest about where they need to improve. That shows that you value the person's potential. That requires candor. One of the secrets of being candid is to think, speak, and act in terms of who the person has the potential to become, and to think about how you can help them to reach it. Proverbs says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy." If you're candid with others, but with their benefit in mind, it doesn't have to be harmful. It can be similar to the work of a surgeon. It may hurt, but it is meant to help them, and it shouldn't harm. As a leader, you must be willing and able to do that. If not, you won't be able to help your people grow and change. Caring establishes the relationship, while candor expands the relationship. The things that usually help to establish a relationship are common ground and care. But those things usually aren't enough to make a relationship grow. To expand a relationship, candor and open communication are required. Most leaders I talk to have a difficult conversation that they know they need to have but are avoiding. Usually they are reluctant for one of two reasons. Either they don't like confrontation or they fear that they will hurt the person they need to talk to. But if a leader can balance care and candor, it will actually deepen and strengthen the relationship. Let me give you an example. Cheryl came to work for me because she was a real go-getter with a lot of potential. For 6 months I watched her work, and what I discovered was that she was great at the hard side of leadership. She was energetic, she was organized, she was a good planner, and she always got things done. But she totally neglected the soft side of leadership, the relational part. She wasn't winning over anyone she was leading, and as a result, she wasn't gaining influence, which meant that her leadership was going to be very limited. I scheduled a meeting with her so that we could have a candid conversation about her leadership style. I let her know how much I respected her ability and how much I cared about her as a person. But I also let her know that she was falling short and how that would limit her in her ability to lead people. I also offered to coach her on the relational side. To her credit, she accepted my criticism and took my help. For the next couple years, I met with her regularly, critiqued her interaction with others, gave her reading assignments, and asked her to do things that would stretch her. She blossomed as a leader and began to win people on level 2, and that freed her up to keep growing. It wasn't long before she worked her way up to level 4 with many people in the organization. Not everyone responds well to candid conversations. Let's face it, honesty can hurt. Some people shut down when you criticize them. Others leave and work somewhere else. However, if you have candid conversations with someone and that person hangs in there and grows, she will make herself a candidate for the climb up to level 3 and beyond, just as Cheryl did. Caring defines the relationship, while candor directs the relationship. Solid relationships are defined by how people care about one another. But just because people care about one another doesn't mean that they are going anywhere together. Getting a team moving together to accomplish a goal is the responsibility of a leader, and it often requires candor. My friend Colin Sewell, owner of several auto dealerships, said to me, "Leaders have to make the best decision for the largest group of people. Therefore, leaders give up the right to cater to an individual if it hurts the team or the organization." Getting results always matters, and good leaders never lose track of that. One night at a basketball banquet, the president of a junior college was congratulating the coach and the team profusely. The beaming coach asked the president, "Would you still like me as much if we didn't win?" "I'd like you as much," the president replied. "I'd just miss having you around." Retired Army General and former Secretary of State Colin Powell noted, "Good leadership involves responsibility to the welfare of the group, which means that some people will get angry at your actions and decisions. It's inevitable if you're honorable. If you want to lead people well, you need to be willing to direct them candidly." Caring should never suppress candor, while candor should never displace caring. The bottom line, which has already become very clear, is that good leaders must embrace both care and candor. You can't ignore either. So to help you keep the balance between the two, I've created a caring candor checklist for working with people. Before having a candid conversation, make sure that you can answer yes to the following questions. Have I invested enough in the relationship to be candid with them? Do I truly value them as people? Am I sure this is their issue and not mine? Am I sure I'm not speaking up because I feel threatened? Is the issue more important than the relationship? Does this conversation clearly serve their interest and not just mine? Am I willing to invest time and energy to help them change? Am I willing to show them how to do something, not just say what's wrong? Am I willing and able to set clear, specific expectations? If you can answer yes to all of these questions, then your motives are probably right and you have a good chance of being able to communicate effectively. As a young leader, I found it very difficult to have candid conversations with people. I often postponed those difficult talks, hoping that an issue would go away. Seldom did that happen. Maybe you relate to that. If so, you'll be glad to hear that you're normal. However, you need to know that candid conversations are a leader's responsibility and must be done, but in the right way, with the right attitude. When an employee is hired to get a certain job done and doesn't, that hurts the team and the organization. And then it's time for the leader to take action. That can be very hard, but in the long term, it is the best not only for the organization, but also for the person who needs to hear what's not going right. The next time you find yourself in a place where you need to have a candid conversation, just remember this. Do it quickly. Shovel the pile while it is small. Do it calmly. Never in anger. Use the caring candor checklist. Do it privately. You want to help the person, not embarrass him or her. Do it thoughtfully, in a way that minimizes embarrassment or intimidation. If your goal is to help the individual, improve the team, and fulfill the vision of the organization, then this is the path you should follow as a leader. As you work with people and have candid conversations, allow me to remind you of one more thing. Candidness is a two-way street. If you want to be an effective leader and earn your way onto level 2, you must allow the people you work with to be candid with you. You must solicit feedback. And you must be mature and secure enough to take in people's criticism without defensiveness and learn from it. Leadership expert Warren Bennis observed, effective leaders reward dissent as well as encourage it. They understand that whatever momentary discomfort they experience as a result of being told from time to time that they are wrong is more than offset by the fact that reflective backtalk increases a leader's ability to make good decisions. Caring for people, making good decisions for everyone involved, and building solid relationships is what level 2 is all about. This is permission at its best. The laws of leadership at the permission level. If you want to use the laws of leadership to help you grow and win permission on level 2, then consider the following. The law of influence. The true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. If you boil leadership down to its essence, it is influence. Leaders help people work together to accomplish goals that benefit everyone involved. How does one person get others to do something willingly, excellently, and consistently? By influencing them. When I first developed the 5 levels, I called it the 5 levels of influence. Why? Because each time a leader climbs a level, their influence increases. The influencing process begins at level 2, where relationships are formed. That is where leadership begins the shift from coercion to cooperation. The law of addition. Leaders add value by serving others. Why do people initially want to be in leadership? Is it to gain power? To have more freedom? To receive a bigger paycheck? To feed their ego? Many times leaders begin their careers with selfish motives. Maybe that's not a good thing, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing if we are willing to change and put our focus on others. I have observed that most Level 1 leaders who have no desire to move up to Level 2 permission haven't gotten beyond the selfishness of wanting a leadership position for their own benefit. To move up to Level 2, leaders need to understand that great leaders practice the law of addition. They lead in order to help people and add value to them. The law of solid ground. Trust is the foundation of leadership. Trust is the foundation not only of leadership relationships, but of all relationships. You cannot influence people who don't trust you. You cannot build positive relationships with people if they perceive you negatively. Trust is a glue that holds people together. Trust begins at Level 2, and it grows as you climb to the higher levels of leadership. If people trust you, they will be willing to move upward with you. Without trust, you'll quickly find yourself back down at Level 1. The law of magnetism. Who you are is who you attract. I've studied leadership dynamics since I was a teenager, and something I've noticed early is that birds of a feather flock together. It is a fact of life that like-minded people are attracted to one another. Groups of people tend to be of similar age, values, and background. I've also seen that leaders attract who they are, not necessarily who they want. As you gain influence in your department or organization, that can be good news or bad news. If the people who start flocking to you are relational, non-territorial, teachable, and productive, then that is a positive statement about your leadership. If they are positional, closed-minded, and unmotivated, then that reflects negatively on your leadership. If you want to change your team, then change yourself. The law of connection. Leaders touch your heart before they ask for a hand. If you want to build relationships and gain people's permission to lead them, then work hard to connect with them. I define connecting as having the ability to identify with and relate to people in such a way that it increases your influence with them. That is what you must do on Level 2 to win them over and earn the right to lead them. The law of buy-in. People buy into the leader, then the vision. Leaders are by nature visionary. They have great hopes. They have big dreams. They want to win and win big. But a great vision without a great team often turns into a nightmare. Teamwork makes the dream work. I'll discuss how to build a team on Level 3. Often leaders share their visions with me and then ask, "Do you think my people will buy into my vision?" When they ask me this, I know they don't understand Level 2 permission and probably haven't won it yet with their people. Why do I say that? Because they're asking the wrong question. Instead, they should be asking, "Have my people bought into me?" The size or the worthiness of a leader's vision often isn't what determines whether it will be achieved. The determining factor is usually the level of the leader. Before you ask people to move forward to achieve the vision, they must first buy into you as a leader. Before they buy into you as a leader, you must have earned their trust and gained permission to lead them. That begins on Level number 2. Beliefs that help a leader move up to Level number 3. Moving up to Level 2 from Level 1 is a significant advance in leadership ability. Very often an achiever or a producer will be given a leadership position at Level 1 with the expectation that that person can make the transition from worker to leader. Most of the people who fail to move up into leadership don't make it because they never understand the importance of building relationships with people that they work with and gaining their permission to lead them. However, there are still more important leadership levels to be won. If you have worked your way up to Level 2 with people and have gained their confidence as a person who cares about them, then it's time to start thinking about the way a Level 3 leader does. To begin that shift, keep in mind the following 3 things. Number 1, relationships alone are not enough. Although the permission level may bring you and your team great satisfaction relationally, if you stay on Level 2 and never advance, you won't really prove yourself as a leader. The good news is that if you have connected with your team, you have some influence with them. The question now is, what are you going to do with that influence? True leadership takes people somewhere so that they can accomplish something. That requires a leader to connect people's potential to their performance. The permission level is foundational to good leadership, but it is not your ultimate goal. Number 2, Building relationships requires twofold growth. Throughout this chapter, I've talked about building relationships. In doing that, I focused on how people need to grow toward each other. But for relationships to be meaningful, there's another kind of growth that also is needed. People must also grow with each other. Growing toward each other requires compatibility. Growing with each other requires intentionality. If you are married or in a significant long-term relationship, then you probably understand how these dynamics come into play. When you first met your partner, you moved toward one another based on attraction, common ground, and shared experiences. You establish the relationship. However, a relationship can't last if you never go beyond those initial experiences. To stay together, you need to sustain the relationship. That requires common growth. If you don't grow together, there's a very good chance you may grow apart. Similarly, if you are to have any staying power as a leader, you must grow toward and with your people. Just because you've developed good relationships with your people, don't think that you're done on the relational side. There's still more work to do. Number 3, achieving the vision as a team is worth risking the relationships. Building relationships with people can be hard work. But to succeed as a leader and to move up to the higher levels of leadership, you have to be willing to risk what you've developed relationally for the sake of the bigger picture. Leaders must be willing to sacrifice for the sake of the vision. If achieving the vision is worth building the team, it is also worth risking the relationships. Building relationships and then risking them to advance the team creates tension for a leader. That tension will force you to make a choice, to shrink the vision or stretch the people to reach it. If you want to do big things, you need to take people out of their comfort zones. They might fail. They might implode. They might relieve their own tension by fighting you or quitting. Risk always changes relationships. If you risk and win, then your people gain confidence. You have shared history that makes the relationship stronger. Trust increases, and the team is ready to take on even more difficult challenges. However, if you risk and fail, you lose relational credibility with your people, and you will have to rebuild the relationships. Risk is always present in leadership. Any time you try to move forward, there is risk. Even if you're doing the right things, your risk isn't reduced. But there is no progress without risk, so you need to get used to it. The bottom line is that you can slow down early in your leadership to build relationships on level 2, or you can forge ahead trying to skip straight to level 3. But if you do, you will have to backtrack later to build those relationships. And you need to recognize that doing that will slow your momentum, and it will actually take you longer to build the team than if you did it the right way in the first place. Starbucks founder Howard Schultz said, "If people relate to the company they work for, if they form an emotional tie to it and buy into its dreams, they will pour their hearts into making it better." I believe that is true. What is the key link between people and the company? The leader they work with. That leader is the face, heart, and hands of the company on a day-to-day basis. If that leader connects and cares, that makes a huge difference. Guide to growing through level 2. As you reflect on the upsides, downsides, best behaviors, and beliefs related to the permission level of leadership, use the following guidelines to help you grow as a leader. Number 1, be sure you have the right attitude toward people. The key issue when it comes to the permission level of leadership is how much you like people and how much they like you. And here's the good news. You can control how much you like people, and in general, if you genuinely like people, they will find you to be likable. This may seem too simplistic, but make a decision to like everyone from today forward. Even if they don't like you, write out that intention, then sign it and date it. If you need to, keep it in front of you as a daily reminder to make people a priority. Number 2, connect with yourself. To become someone who is good at building relationships with others, you must become the kind of person you would want to spend time with. Using the 5 components listed in this chapter for connecting with yourself, put yourself on a growth plan that will help you to win the following. Self-awareness. Know your personality type, temperament, talents, strengths, and weaknesses. Self-image. Deal with any personal issues you may have so that you can think of yourself in a positive way. Self-honesty. Look at yourself realistically and decide to face reality, no matter how much it may hurt. Self-improvement. Make a commitment to grow in your ability to develop relationships. Self-responsibility. Acknowledge that you are responsible for your own actions and attitudes. Number 3, understand where you're coming from. Are you a naturally relational person who tends to put people ahead of productivity? Or are you an achiever who tends to put productivity ahead of people? You must recognize which you are and learn to win both relationships and results. Number 4, express value for each person on your team. Take some time and come up with positive things that you can honestly say about each person on your team. Then take the time during the next week to tell each person at least one positive thing about themselves. Number 5, evaluate where you are with your team. Write a list with the names of the people on your team. Now for each, determine how well you know them by answering the following questions, which come from materials the Eli Lilly Corporation developed from the 5 levels of leadership. What 3 non-business things do you know about this person? What does this person value? What are this person's top 3 concerns? What does this person want or hope for in life? If you are unable to answer these questions for someone on your team, then you need to spend more time getting to know that person. Set aside time this week to get to know him or her better. Number 6, accept the whole person as a part of leading. If you want to be a good leader, you don't get to use people's time and skills while ignoring or neglecting the rest of them as individuals. That's not fair or right. Learn to accept responsibility for helping people and dealing with the messy side of leadership, or step down and get out of leading, without standing on the sidelines and criticizing the way other people lead. Number 7, make fun a goal. One of the best ways for goal-oriented individuals to develop a more people-oriented style of leadership is to try to make the workplace more fun. If you're more task-oriented than people-oriented, then make fun a goal on your to-do list. That will make it more palatable for you while at the same time making you more likable. Number 8, give people your undivided attention. Many people in the workplace today feel dehumanized and demoralized. They believe that the leaders and organizations they work for don't care about them as people. To counter that, when you engage with people, pay attention and really listen. Few things communicate that you care for people better than giving them your undivided attention, and it doesn't cost you anything but time. Number 9, become your team's encourager-in-chief. People are naturally attracted to people who give them confidence and make them feel good about themselves. You can be a leader who does that if you're willing to become an intentional encourager. Try it out. For the next 2 weeks, say something encouraging to someone on your team every day. Then watch to see how that person responds. Do that with everyone on your team, and they will not only want to work with you, but they will also get more done. Number 10, practice care and candor. If you care about your people, you'll want to be honest with them in a way that helps them. When you see that someone on your team is making mistakes or in some way falling short, plan to talk with that person immediately. Use the caring candor checklist to make sure that you do it in the right way. And remember, it's hard to go wrong as long as you're practicing the golden rule.